Battle of Cannae. The Battle of Cannae was one of the most devastating defeats in Roman history, fought during the Second Punic War between Hannibal's Carthaginian forces and the Roman Republic. Hannibal had marched his army across the Alps and struck fear into Rome with his tactical genius. At Cannae, he faced a massive Roman force, around 80,000 men, commanded by consuls Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. Hannibal deliberately placed his weaker troops in the center, luring the Romans into a frontal assault. As the Romans pressed forward, his cavalry and elite infantry closed in from the sides, encircling the Roman army in a maneuver later known as the double envelopment. The result was catastrophic. In a single day, over 50,000 Roman soldiers were killed, including many senators and officers. It was one of the bloodiest single days of combat in ancient history. Despite the scale of the disaster, Rome refused to surrender, choosing instead to rebuild its armies and continue the war. Cannae remains a classic case study in military strategy, showing how brilliant tactics can overcome even overwhelming numbers. Battle of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad was the deadliest battle of World War II and one of the most brutal in human history. In the summer of 1942, Adolf Hitler launched an offensive to capture Stalingrad, a vital industrial city on the Volga River. The Soviet Red Army, under General Vasily Chuikov, defended the city street by street in fierce urban combat. Buildings were reduced to rubble, yet every ruined house became a fortress. Soldiers fought with rifles, grenades, and bayonets in hand-to-hand struggles, earning the battle the grim title of a War of Rats. As winter set in, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, encircling the German Sixth Army. Cut off from supplies, German forces starved and froze in the ruins of the city. By February 1943, more than 2 million soldiers and civilians had been killed, wounded, or captured. The surrender of General Friedrich Paulus and his army marked a turning point in the war. Stalingrad became a symbol of Soviet resilience and one of the greatest catastrophes ever inflicted on Nazi Germany. Its sheer scale, destruction, and human cost cemented it as one of the most brutal battles ever fought. Battle of Verdun. The Battle of Verdun was one of the longest and most grueling battles of World War I, lasting from February to December 1916. The German High Command, led by Erich von Falkenhayn, launched the offensive with the aim of bleeding France white by targeting Verdun, a fortress city symbolic of French pride. The French, under General Philippe Pétain, swore to hold it at all costs, giving rise to the defiant phrase, "They shall not pass." The battle quickly became a nightmare of trench warfare. Artillery fire was relentless, reducing hills and forests to barren wastelands. Soldiers lived in mud-filled trenches under constant bombardment, often advancing only a few yards at staggering human cost. Verdun became a furnace of attrition, where exhaustion, disease, and psychological trauma claimed nearly as many lives as bullets and shells. By the end, after 300 days of relentless combat, both sides had suffered more than 700,000 casualties combined. The front lines barely shifted, yet the battle left an indelible scar on France. Verdun came to symbolize national sacrifice and endurance, remembered as one of the most punishing struggles of the Great War. Battle of the Somme. The Battle of the Somme was one of the bloodiest battles of World War I, launched by the British and French to relieve pressure on Verdun. On July 1st, 1916, British forces went over the top after a week-long artillery barrage that was supposed to destroy German defenses. Instead, the Germans were dug in deep, and when the assault began, machine guns tore through waves of advancing soldiers. On that first day alone, the British suffered more than 57,000 casualties, the worst single day in their military history. The battle raged for months along a muddy, cratered front. Tanks were used in combat for the first time, but they often broke down or became stuck. Airplanes played a growing role in reconnaissance and bombing, signaling the dawn of modern warfare. Despite enormous losses, Allied forces gained only a few miles of ground. By the end of November, more than 1 million men had been killed or wounded on both sides. The Somme became a symbol of the futility of trench warfare, where unimaginable sacrifice resulted in minimal territorial gains. Its legacy is one of tragedy, endurance, and the harsh realities of industrialized war. Battle of Gaugamela. The Battle of Gaugamela was the decisive clash between Alexander the Great of Macedon and Darius III of Persia, a fight that ended centuries of Persian dominance. Darius commanded a vast army, possibly numbering over 100,000 men, including war elephants and scythed chariots. Alexander's force was smaller, around 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry, but it was disciplined, mobile, and led by one of history's greatest tacticians. On the plain near Gaugamela, Darius tried to use sheer numbers and his wide chariots to break Alexander's line. Alexander countered with precision. He led a cavalry charge that pierced the Persian center, driving straight toward Darius. The Persian king fled the battlefield, causing his army to collapse into chaos. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's forces achieved a crushing victory. The aftermath was monumental. The Persian Empire, which had ruled from the Aegean to India, was shattered. Within a few years, Alexander controlled its vast territories, spreading Greek culture across the known world. Gaugamela remains one of history's most studied battles, a prime example of strategy and leadership overcoming overwhelming odds. Battle of Antietam. The Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest single day in American history, fought during the U.S. Civil War. On September 17, 1862, Union forces under General George McClellan clashed with Confederate troops led by General Robert E. Lee near Sharpsburg, Maryland. The fighting erupted at dawn and raged through cornfields, forests, and a sunken road that became known as Bloody Lane. Union assaults pushed back the Confederates, but McClellan's cautious tactics prevented a decisive victory. By nightfall, more than 22,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing. The battlefield was littered with devastation, and the shocking scale of casualties stunned the nation. Yet strategically, Antietam was a turning point. Lee's invasion of the North was halted, and President Abraham Lincoln seized the moment to issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. Although neither side gained clear ground, Antietam's political consequences were profound. It discouraged European powers from recognizing the Confederacy and redefined the Union war effort as a struggle against slavery. Remembered as the bloodiest day in America's past, Antietam remains a stark reminder of the Civil War's immense human cost.
Battle of Hastings. The Battle of Hastings was a pivotal clash that reshaped the future of England. On October 14, 1066, the Norman forces of William, Duke of Normandy, faced the Anglo-Saxon army of King Harold Godwinson. Harold's troops had just marched south after defeating a Viking invasion at Stamford Bridge, leaving them exhausted but determined. The English shield wall held firm against repeated Norman cavalry charges. The turning point came when William used a feigned retreat, tricking part of the English line into breaking formation. Norman knights then surrounded and cut them down. As the day wore on, King Harold was struck and killed. Legend says by an arrow to the eye, though accounts differ. With their king fallen, the Anglo-Saxon defense collapsed. William's victory made him William the Conqueror, and he became the first Norman king of England. The conquest brought sweeping changes, including a new ruling class, the introduction of Norman laws, and the construction of castles across the land. Hastings is remembered as the battle that transformed England's language, culture, and destiny. Battle of Kursk. The Battle of Kursk was the largest tank battle in history and one of World War II's decisive confrontations. In July 1943, German forces launched Operation Citadel, aiming to crush the Soviet defenses bulging around the city of Kursk. They deployed thousands of tanks, including the formidable Tiger and Panther models, in a massive pincer movement. Waiting for them were deeply prepared Soviet fortifications, minefields, anti-tank guns, and waves of T-34 tanks. The fighting was fierce, with armored clashes stretching across open fields. At Prokhorovka, one of the battle's bloodiest encounters, hundreds of tanks fought at close range in clouds of smoke and fire. Despite initial German advances, the Red Army absorbed the assault and then counterattacked, pushing the exhausted German divisions back. By the end, Both sides had suffered staggering losses, hundreds of thousands of men and thousands of tanks, but Germany could not recover. The defeat at Kursk marked the last major German offensive on the Eastern Front. From then on, the Soviet Union advanced relentlessly toward Berlin. Kursk demonstrated the turning tide of mechanized warfare and the resilience of Soviet defense. Battle of Agincourt. The Battle of Agincourt was a stunning English victory during the Hundred Years' War, remembered for the devastating power of the longbow. On October 25, 1415, King Henry V of England faced a French army that heavily outnumbered his own. The English troops were weary and sick after a long campaign, but they took position on a narrow, muddy field. French knights charged repeatedly, weighed down by heavy armor. The ground quickly turned into a trap, sucking horses and men into the mud. From behind wooden stakes, English archers unleashed waves of arrows. The French cavalry and infantry were cut down before they could even reach the English lines. Those who advanced became crushed in the chaos, unable to move or fight effectively. The result was catastrophic for France. Thousands of French nobles perished, while English losses were comparatively light. Agincourt became legendary not only for Henry V's leadership, but also for how skill and discipline overcame superior numbers. The longbow emerged as a weapon of fear and dominance, forever tied to this moment in history. Battle of Sekigahara. The Battle of Sekigahara was the decisive conflict that unified Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate. On October 21, 1600, rival factions of samurai clashed on the misty fields of Sekigahara. The Eastern Army, led by Tokugawa Ieyasu, faced the Western Army under Ishida Mitsunari. Both sides commanded tens of thousands of warriors, and the battle's outcome would decide the future of Japan. The fighting was intense, with samurai charging through fog and mud, banners waving above the chaos. At a crucial moment, several Western commanders betrayed Ishida and defected to Tokugawa's side. This sudden shift broke the cohesion of the Western Army, turning the tide of battle. By day's end, Tokugawa had achieved a decisive victory. Ishida was captured and executed, and resistance quickly collapsed. The triumph at Sekigahara allowed Tokugawa Ieyasu to establish the shogunate that ruled Japan for over 250 years, ushering in an era of stability and isolation. Sekigahara is remembered as the battle that shaped the destiny of Japan. Battle of Thermopylae. The Battle of Thermopylae was one of antiquity's most famous last stands, fought during the Greco-Persian Wars. When King Xerxes of Persia invaded Greece with a vast army, a small coalition of Greek city-states chose to resist. Leading them was King Leonidas of Sparta, who commanded just a few thousand men, including his legendary 300 Spartans. They took position at the narrow pass of Thermopylae, where the Persian numerical advantage was blunted. For 3 days, the Greeks held the line. Wave after wave of Persian soldiers, including the elite immortals, failed to break through. Eventually, a local trader revealed a hidden mountain path, allowing Persian forces to outflank the defenders. Leonidas and his Spartans fought to the death, buying precious time for the rest of Greece to prepare. Though a Persian victory, Thermopylae became a symbol of courage and sacrifice against overwhelming odds. The story inspired generations, remembered not for its outcome, but for the resolve of a few warriors who stood against an empire. Battle of Okinawa. The Battle of Okinawa was one of the last and bloodiest battles of World War II, fought on the doorstep of Japan. Beginning in April 1945, American forces launched an invasion of Okinawa, a strategically vital island. Defending it were Japanese troops who dug into caves, tunnels, and fortified ridges. The fighting was relentless. Kamikaze attacks struck Allied ships offshore, while on land, U.S. troops faced fierce resistance as they advanced yard by yard. Civilian suffering was immense. Thousands were caught between the armies, many forced into hiding in caves. The battle raged for nearly 3 months before the island was secured. Casualties were staggering. Over 200,000 soldiers and civilians lost their lives. Okinawa showed the horrific cost of a potential invasion of Japan's main islands. It directly influenced the U.S. decision to use atomic bombs in hopes of avoiding an even bloodier conflict. Remembered as both a military victory and a human tragedy, Okinawa marked the final great battle of the Pacific War.